You kids have fun now.
Hello, my name is Shea, and when my wife Kaylee is here, normally we are talking about tackling some big debt in the Big Apple, but I am here all by myself for the first time today to talk about my wedding dress that I chose to make for myself for the purpose of saving money on this wedding. Um, I didn't realize that it would be such a highly anticipated video, but I'm here. I'm doing it now, and I'm just gonna sit and chat about my process and how it all worked out and how long it took and whether or not I felt like it was worth it. So that maybe you can glean some good ideas from this or just be entertained. Either or both is wonderful. So let's get right into it. I kind of always knew that I wanted to make my own wedding dress. For some context, I work professionally in theatrical costuming. My first ever big girl job was in the costume shop at a regional theater. So I have some experience in constructing pieces of clothing, patterning pieces of clothing, coming up with designs, and taking those designs and making them work. I have some experience in that field, so I wasn't going into this completely blind. I wanted to sort of think about it and think about what silhouettes I liked and what looked good on me and what photos of other wedding dresses I had seen that I enjoyed, and I started on June 8th with this mood board. I'm just gonna move myself right here. So my process began on June 8th, which was almost a full year before the wedding because I knew that it was going to take a while. I didn't want Kaylee to see the dress for our first look before the day of our wedding. I wanted to keep it a secret, and I knew that because of that, there would be limited time in between like the end of May when we got engaged and the next June when we got married, where I would actually be able to work on the dress by myself. So I knew I had to get a jump on it as soon as I possibly could, and this was the mood board that I came up with for the dress. So I knew I wanted there to be some color, but I wanted it to be mostly white, and at first I thought I wanted to have a halter top, and I thought I wanted it corseted, and I was going to draft a pattern completely from scratch, and none of those things ended up being realistic. So you'll see there are some notes on here and some reference photos of an underbust corset and like a whole situation that's happening in the back that never ended up happening. But I was really happy with this vision. I generally love this silhouette on me. I tend to look really great in V-necks with a nice flowy skirt that doesn't have too much poof to it. So that was my starting point. And after realizing that drafting a pattern fully from scratch was going to be a little bit out of my range of expertise, what I decided to do instead was go and find an already existing dress and make a pattern based on the dress that I found. So I went to Macy's and headed into the little clearance section, and I looked around until I found this dress. And you can see it's made of very light materials, and it's got lots of different layers, so it really lent itself very nicely to the design that I had in my head. So I went ahead and bought this, and this dress was what I made the pattern out of, essentially, for my dress. And the beautiful thing about taking this approach when you're pattern drafting is that you get two dresses in one at the end of it. So now not only do I have my wedding dress, which I love very much, but I also have this dress, which is appropriate to wear to other people's weddings, and I know it looks really good on me. So that's what I started with. And then the next step in this process was to make what's called a mock-up. So a mock-up is basically when you take the cheapest cotton fabric you can find and test out the pattern that you've made to see if everything works. So I took this, and as you can see, it's very sloppy. Some seams are completely inside out because I just forgot to sew them on the wrong way. But that's not really the most important part of this process. The most important part is just to make sure that everything fits the way it's supposed to. And you can see there was a moment where I was like, maybe I add a sleeve, and I decided not to do that. And you can also see there's a little weird like pooling of fabric sort of around the front of the shoulder that I had to adjust. So I took measurements, I made markings, and I adjusted kind of the way everything fit on the cotton so that when I moved on to the real fabric, I wouldn't be wasting, precious resources, if you will, on figuring out whether the thing was going to fit correctly. So after that point, I was ready to bring in the real fabric to start the construction of the actual dress. So for this whole week from January 24th to like February 4th, this was basically what the entire apartment looked like. Kaylee was on a business trip at the time, so I just filled up the entire house with fabric and scraps, and I moved our kitchen table into the living room so that I could, lay all the fabric out. And you can kind of see the 3 different layers of fabric that I chose, and you'll sort of be able to see how they all come together in later steps. But this is what I ended up with at the end of those 2 weeks. It's basically just the top of the dress. So you can see, like, in the front is where it closes, and then the shoulders, they get gathered up, so they look really wide in this photograph, but they end up getting gathered, so they have, a nice little poof to them, and that took me 2 weeks of working basically from the moment that I clocked out of work until I was ready to go to bed. So that part of the process was incredibly laborious. I had a lot of movies to keep me company, but it did take a very long time because every single piece you have to cut out 3 separate times because you're working with 3 separate layers of fabric. And then also the fabric that I was working with, because it's so light and so slippery, was really difficult to work with. So I had to literally tape it down to the table in order to make sure that my pencil markings were in the right place and I wasn't, cutting in the wrong spots and having it slide everywhere. So it did take a while. This was like the most laborious part of the process, but then things really sped up once I was past that hurdle. So after that, I added the little waist part that you can see right here. Eventually that's all gonna get filled with elastic so the waist gets cinched in as well. And the beautiful thing about the design for this dress actually is that there was no boning, there was no structure, everything had elastic in the waist, so I knew I was going to enjoy this because we had a pizza truck for the wedding and I wanted to eat as much pizza as I possibly could, and that design of the dress was really going to allow for that, and I wouldn't need to worry about gaining or losing weight because whatever the situation was, I knew the dress would fit because it had an elastic waistband, and that was something that I really preferred for myself. I knew it was going to be hot, so I wanted to be comfortable, and the elastic waistband was definitely the move when it came to that. So once I had the waistband on, obviously then it was time to cut out the skirt, and that was sort of this process that we had right here. So I was like literally on the floor. I don't have any photos of this because I was on the floor, like trying to rush to get everything done. I had to move all of the furniture out of the kitchen and set everything down on the floor so that I could cut out these huge circles of fabric. But once I had them all cut out, things really started picking up. So by March 12th, you can see I had the first 2 layers of the skirt put together, and then the final layer that goes over that floral is the white chiffon that's kind of see-through, so you can still see the floral a little bit, but it's still mostly white, and it's still giving, bridal energy, which I obviously wanted. March 18th was when I sort of started to really put the dress together. So this is the inside layer. This is the silk lining that I picked out for myself, which was so unbelievably breathable and comfortable. And I'm very glad that I picked the nicest fabric to be the lining. It was by far the most expensive, but it was super worth it because that's the layer that's closest to my skin, and it was really hot and it was really humid on the day of our wedding, and that lining, because it was 100% silk, really saved me in a lot of ways. So I'm glad I made that investment. But that's what it looks like on the inside when I started to put it together. So you can see here that actually by the end of the day on March 18th, I had put all 3 of the layers of the skirt together. So it was the silk on the bottom, and then the silk blend floral in the middle, and then the polyester white chiffon on top. And I was so excited that everything was, you know, kind of finally coming together on this day. So that really got me motivated and pushed me forward to get to a place where I could do a first fitting. And that happened on March 20th. And Kaylee at this point was once again on a business trip away. So I was just absolutely dancing around the apartment in this dress. And even though it still had to get hemmed and there were a few fit issues that I still had to address, I was so excited and I was so happy with the way everything came out. I was calling and FaceTiming all of my friends and my parents, and we were all just absolutely jumping out of our seats with excitement. And Kaylee was feeling very jealous that everyone got to see it except for her. But I think we're both very glad that she waited to see it until the day of the wedding, because the impact was much greater because she hadn't gotten to see it yet. So after this point, I had to hem the whole dress because you can see it's dragging on the floor right here, and that's not what I wanted, certainly for an outdoor wedding. I didn't want the hem of my dress to get all muddy. So you can see here, I flipped it inside out to hem the first 2 layers, and I made the lining layer a little bit shorter just so that no one would be able to see it. And then this here on March 22nd, I was like, okay, there are a couple tiny fit issues, but it's done, it's wearable, everything is going to be great. Well, it took me until May 29th, so 2 full months, until it was actually in a place where I was happy with it. And this was definitely a dark period. I mean, you know, relatively speaking, it was like the low point of me trying to make this dress, because it just felt like every time I tried to make an adjustment on the fit of the armholes and the fit sort of around my bust, I still had this issue where there was like fabric pooling in a way that I didn't want to around the shoulders. And I took it to one of my friends who also works in costuming, and I was like, what do I do? I don't know what to do. So I just, every chance I got, I was futzing with it and fixing it and making adjustments and considering throwing the whole thing out. But I'm really glad that I pushed through, because this was the result. So this was the final look with me and Kaylee, and I am so happy that I stayed the course and stuck with it and made my own dress. Are there some things that if I had had even more time, I would have gone back and done differently? Yes, absolutely there are. I think on the waist especially, I made the elastic perhaps a little bit too tight. And if I had made it a little bit looser, it would have laid a little bit flatter on my body, but you can see here it's kind of bunching up above my hips, and I think having slightly looser elastic would have helped that. But the fun thing about this is that I want to shorten it. I want to take it just above the knee and wear it every year on our anniversary. So this is actually probably not the end of the life cycle of this dress, and I'm probably going to go back and refine maybe even more things when I go back to shorten it, because I want to keep wearing this dress as long as I possibly can. I don't want to have worn it only once, and so that's my plan. So you are probably wondering, how much did this dress actually cost to make? Was it worth my time? Did I save money? And the answer is kind of complicated, because on paper, yes, I saved an absolute ton of money. You can see right here on our betrothal dashboard, the actual price of the base dress and the fabric and the pattern paper and the mock-up fabric and everything that I needed to make the dress was $429.20. And that is very, very affordable for a wedding dress. And so what I'd like to do is compare this to a dress that I would have wanted to buy had I not chosen to make it for myself. I absolutely love this company. I think every single dress they put together, they're called Flora and Lane. Every single dress they put together is absolutely stunning. It's one of a kind. their craftsmanship and the work and the kind of dresses. I mean, it's just absolutely stunning. But obviously, it was way out of my price range. We weren't going to be able to make that work on a $10,000 budget for the wedding. So I decided to make my own. And the thing to remember here is that, you know, my time as a seamstress is worth money. So if I had been making that wedding dress for someone else and charging for the time that it took me to make that dress, it probably would have ended up being somewhere in this price range. But because I was making it for myself and not paying myself, you know, my per hour rate for sewing things, it ended up obviously being much more affordable. And that was, at the end of the day, definitely the way to go. And then sort of the thing that you can't put a dollar sign on is that it ended up being really special. You know, I have an incredibly personal connection to this dress now, and it's something that I have a great amount of pride in, and something that I'm so glad I got to share with the world, and something that I'm so glad I kind of persevered with and ended up doing, because I absolutely love the way it turned out. So, final thoughts from original concept to final product. Was it worth it? Yes. Would I recommend this to somebody else? Not necessarily. It was very labor intensive. It took a really, really long time, and it was a very scary process. I thought I was going to be, you know, like absolutely out of luck, you know, weeks before the wedding with no dress because I thought I was going to ruin it. Like, it was very nerve-wracking, but I'm really glad I did it. It ended up being something that was really special to me, and I knew since I had the experience needed to make this happen that, you know, it would come out as something that I wanted to wear and would be proud of. And so if you have sewing experience and you feel like this is something you really want to do, go for it. And just know that it's going to be a lot. It's a lot of pressure to put on yourself, but I'm really glad I did it. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it didn't get too technical. And so with that, I think this video is going to be over, and Kaylee and I will see you on Friday for our honeymoon vacation edition of Why Not Budget With Me. So tune back in for that. Until then, have an absolutely wonderful week.